So good evening. Welcome to the District Advisory Building Committee. Today is Thursday, October 21st, and we're meeting via Zoom. And I will take roll and welcome. I see that Emily, oh, there's Mark now. Okay, I was going to say Emily's on here twice. So welcome everybody. And doing roll, I have Mark Dion, my co-chair.
Here.
Chair Emily Figdor of the school board.
Here.
Hello. Aura Russell-Better. Jess Marino. Abigail Fuller. Brad Post. Matthew Winch.
Here.
Jay Norris.
Here.
Paul Stevens.
Here.
Belinda Ray.
Here.
Thank you. I should have said Councilor Dion as well. And we have staff with us this evening. We have Superintendent Botana and Mr. Stilfen. And we also have Laura Jolly from CHA. And we have Mark Lee from Harriman, Lisa Sawin from Harriman, and Emily Wah from Harriman. And we also have Jeff Birnbaum.
Birnbaum, yes.
Birnbaum, okay, from CHA as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and Aura, welcome,
Yeah.
school board member. And I think we have everybody here. So first we'll start out with approval of the meeting minutes from August 19th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Who was that? Aura, thank
Belinda.
you. Okay,
Oh, I'll second if it was Aura. I'll second.
okay, seconded by Belinda. Are there any errors or omissions on the meeting minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from August 19th, please indicate.
Aye.
Okay, passed unanimous with all those present. I wanted to start off this evening first and let you know we are going to have maybe a tough conversation this evening. So I want to make sure that we all, Mark, my co-chair and I met with Harriman staff and superintendent and staff, and we want to make sure that what we discussed tonight, there isn't any finger pointing, that we just have a good, solid conversation, and we'll problem solve from here. What we discussed, some of you may not be very happy about. I don't think many of us are, but we're going to have to move forward from it. And please, if you have any questions whatsoever, use the raise your hand function, and I will do my best to call on you. And I just, again, want to make sure that we are not putting the blame on any one particular person. We're all in this together. So I greatly appreciate your time. And Abigail Fuller has joined us. Good evening, Abigail. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, and good evening, everyone. As Sarah said, we envision today being a very full agenda, and our main goal for tonight is to make sure that everybody is fully up to speed on where we are with the projects at this point, and that we hopefully begin to understand the implications for the projects of our current status. So in preparing for this, we asked Harriman to dive fairly deeply into where we are with all three of the projects. So Reiki, Brezumscott, and Longfellow, to make sure that everybody understands, the commonality across all of them, which is we are currently without permits for any of the projects, and therefore, not able to move the work forward at the pace that it was intended. And, as we approach November and winter conditions, there will be additional implications from that. And we wanted to spend some time today going through where we are with those projects, with the permitting for those projects, and try to understand how we got to be where we are. So that's first. Two, to understand what are the lessons that we can derive from what has happened to date that can be brought to bear on either course corrections or at least into our work as we move forward. And then understanding what what our best estimate is of what are the costs in terms of dollars, as well as what are the implications in terms of timelines of the project where we are, and particularly where those costs begin to cut into our ability to execute on the projects as they're currently contracted to be done. And so what I'm hoping that we're able to do today is to walk away with a full understanding of where we are and the beginning of an understanding of what are the implications of where we are. There's a very dense packet that we have that is included with the agenda, and that is Harriman's effort to sort of document at a discrete level what are the steps that have been taken along the way to get those projects off and running, from the original permit request to where we currently are. I don't think it would be productive for us to walk through all of that at the level of detail that it's there, but it's important for everyone to be able to reference that as we get into the discussion. We've also uploaded a memo from the city, so it's under the permitting timelines line in the agenda, a memorandum from city staff outlining their understanding of where the projects are and the different steps that have happened along the way. I think, as Sarah said, and I know having talked to Councilor Dion today, this is not about finger pointing or blaming anyone for where we are. It really is about trying to understand how we got to where we are, understand where we are, understand how we got there, understand what it is that we can take away from those, what are the lessons learned from being where we are, and then understanding or beginning to understand what are the possible implications for the projects as we go forward. So I guess maybe before we move into sort of the status of projects, let's make sure that everybody understands our charge and that we can, sort of start the in-depth look at the permitting status with everybody having a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So any
questions about what the superintendent covered so far? I'm sure there'll be a lot once we start diving into information. Okay. All right. Go ahead,
Okay.
Mark.
So with that, I don't know, Mark or Lisa.
Yeah, we're going to open up the presentation here. Lisa's microphone was a little bit challenged earlier. We'll see how it's working here right now, but we'll dig in. Well, to the superintendent's point, there's a lot of detailed information, and we'll try not to dwell on any of it in any amount of intensity or length here, so we can kind of get through it in a brisk way. But some of it's important to just understand. There's a sort of complexion of what's transpired, and trying to understand that complexion. Sometimes the details are a little bit helpful, but we won't dwell in any of them to any great extent. And so our next slide here. First, just good evening, everyone. It's good to see folks again. It's been a little bit of time here since the group got together here. So we're going to go through the permitting timeline. So we're going to actually start with Lyseth, even though we're well past the permitting. But I think it's, from a contextual perspective, it's good to see what that process was like as we move now into the remaining 3 schools. And then after the permitting, we'll as the superintendent discussed, we'll talk a little bit about what are the impacts, from the aspect of lessons learned, and also the aspects of what are the impacts to the construction schedules, to the classroom environments, and also the potential cost ramifications. And so we're going to get into all of those at the end of the presentation, and then we'll just quickly look at what we have on the books here for next meetings as we normally do. So we'll start with Lyseth and the next slide here. Lyseth, we applied for the building permit on June 23rd, and that also was after we had gone through the site planning process, just like we were required to do for the 3 schools that we're talking about primarily tonight. We had a round of comments that we received on July 15th, and so that's approximately 3 weeks after our submission. And those comments were markups on the drawings, and they were primarily details around the combustibility of some of the interior framing and blocking, and a question about the gym curtain. That was the extent of the questions. We were not. We didn't have to submit a separate permit for the portables for Lyseth. We had an existing portable on site that was relocated, and that was part of the building permit. We responded to the comments 3 days after we received them, and subsequent to that, we received our permit approximately a week after that. So the full thing was about 4 weeks to receive from the time of applying for the permit to the time we received the building permit for Lyseth. And in the midst of that, we also had a demo permit that allowed the contractor to proceed with some of the demolition. That, as you can see from the dates, the demo permit was a few days after we had submitted the building permit, and 2 days later we received a demo permit allowing the contractor to begin activities on site. So the context of that is in that, the 4 weeks. And so as we thought going forward with the 3 projects, our understanding was, well, okay, if we have the same regulatory body, we have a very similar construction type and phase construction, so we assumed that would be approximately the time frame what we'd be looking at. And there are a lot of variables that we'll go through now in explaining that was not the case. So now I think we're going to move to Longfellow.
Mark, can you just clarify the value of Lyseth that got that permit in that time frame, please?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So and then when thinking about the essentially the scale of the project and the scope of the work that was required, Lyseth was 14.1 million, and so that is on the larger side of any of the 4 projects. So just to give a sense of comparison there. Emily?
Thanks. I had 2 questions. One is I'm wondering how this compared to your typical experience getting renovation school projects through in Maine. Was this, how does this fit into your recent experience? So that's my first question.
Sure. Yeah, and it varies by jurisdiction. The city of Portland is different in some respects for some of the jurisdictions that we deal with because it handles aspects of 2 different codes that we're required to comply with: the building code and the life safety code, and sometimes the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association code. And so, but 4 to 6 weeks is sort of a standard that we would consider for the permit, and considering how much time we would need.
Thanks. And then my second question is, it seems like in reviewing the materials for this meeting that the city is raising questions about the renovation projects, given that they're still occupied by students and staff. And so I'm wondering to what extent that came up at Lyseth, since that was also the case with Lyseth.
Yeah, there really wasn't much. We had a temporary entrance that we created, and that partition was established in the old gym cafetorium. Beyond that, we had a similar separation of construction from student activity, but so the circumstances were there, and the documents we handled initially the same way that we approached these the Longfellow, Reiki, and Presumscot projects, and so, but there was much less back and forth in terms of the information that the city required.
Thanks, Mark.
Councilor Ray?
Thanks. I think I got my question. I wanted what Emily asked second. I also would just note COVID has certainly slowed things down tremendously, and the Lyseth one went through pre-COVID. But is that, I guess my other question is Lyseth the only other project that you've done in Portland?
Yeah, no, we've done other projects in Portland, renovations and new construction projects in Portland. And so Lyseth's not the only one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Matthew Winch?
Thanks, Sarah. Mark, could you summarize how many code updates and new codes in various, since you put Lyseth out there in that sphere, I think it's only fair for everybody to understand how many changes or iterations of the code you're now looking at from IBC, NFPA, as well as local ordinances that were enacted by voter referendum last November.
Thank you, Matt. So there's been one substantial update to MUBEC, the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code, since or between when Lyseth was permitted and when these three projects are permitted. There have been a couple of different local initiatives that, in some cases, they impacted one of our projects more significantly than the other, and that had to do with the energy code upgrade. So even though that the MUBEC includes, as I said, it's Uniform Building and Energy Code, MUBEC had an update to the energy code, but then the city also enacted what's called sometimes called a stretch code, where they went above what the state code was for energy beginning July 1st of this year, and so that's the other major update that that was witnessed, or these projects witnessed. And in terms of just the implications, the upgrades to the codes, sometimes there are significant impacts to the scope of work. Most of them are incremental, and there aren't significant ones. Energy codes are one that are adding more requirements. It's not a lot of smaller changes to code. The energy codes are now just becoming more proactive on energy conservation measures. Matt, did that capture your question?
Yeah, in part. I thought that the state had updated to NFPA 2018 just before COVID, as opposed to before Lyseth was permitted. I know there were some changes there around sprinklering. It gets into the moratorium that you'll probably reference later. And I thought the city had just updated to IBC. I thought the city had updated to the IBC 2018 code too. Between
and again, the degree to which those had significant scope impacts on the projects, we'll see a little bit of that, but there weren't beyond the energy code stretch code. There wasn't a significant impact to the projects, albeit there's a sprinkler requirement for existing school structures, including modular buildings, and so we'll talk about that.
Any further questions at this time? Okay, seeing none, go ahead, Mark.
All right. So we're gonna try to shift now gears into some of the real detailed items. We're gonna attempt to see if Lisa's microphone's working. If not, you're gonna listen to my voice for a little longer here. Lisa, you, yeah, I see
Can you hear me?
we can, loud and clear.
Awesome. All right, we'll work through those technical issues. So I'm going to go through the process for Longfellow, Reiki, and Scott. And as Superintendent Botana mentioned before, there's a lot of detail here. So I don't know that we have to go, I think the request was not to go line by line, but just kind of give an overview as to where we started and where we are. But by all means, if people have questions, please raise your hand, stop us. We'll be happy to discuss them. So Longfellow, we applied for the permit at Longfellow June 4th, 2021. I'm sorry, this is for the portable permit. And I will back up just a minute. There are 7 permits that are in play for these 3 schools. Longfellow, there's a portable permit and a building permit. Reiki, there is a portable permit and a building permit. For Scott, we have a application for a building permit, a portable permit, and a foundation permit. Of those 7, we have 3 right now. We have the portable permits. So this is an update on the process of the portable permit. It was applied for on June 4th, 2021. We had several meetings with the city. Some of these meetings talked about both the portable and the building, but essentially there were kickoff meetings. There were meetings on site to go through the conversations about the portables, where they're going to be, when they're going to come online. So at the same time, we're getting the permits and getting the portables set up. We're also immediately talking about certificate of occupancy for those portables because we need to have them ready for the start of school. There was on July 7th, a permit management meeting. This is typical of all permit applications where we just go over virtually. We meet and we go through all of the requirements of permits and testing and everything the city needs us to be aware of and what they need from us through this process, not only at the initial permit, but throughout the construction process and certificate of occupancy and closeout. August 10th, site walk with the inspectors, and that pretty much, there was a site walk then, and then multiple meetings the week of August 23rd, all really focused on getting the portables up and running so that we had them ready for the start of school. On the permit itself, we received comments back on July 7th, and we responded to those comments on July 11th. A lot of them having to do with making sure that the scope of the drawings just had stuff about the portables and nothing related to the building. They wanted some specifics on the code review and then plans showing the distance from the portables to closest restrooms. We addressed those and we got our permit on July 20th, 2021. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on the Longfellow timeline for the portables.
Any questions at this time? Okay. Seeing none, go ahead.
Find my mouse here so I can advance the next slide here. Let's use this one. All right. Longfellow building permit. We applied for this permit on May 24th, 2021. Currently, we do not have this permit. There have been many meetings and correspondence with the city, going back and forth, talking about essentially the phasing of the construction and meeting with the fire department to review those phases on site. We were realizing that there are several questions that just weren't clear in plan, and so walking it on site. There was a meeting on site about the egress from the second floor and how the city wanted to see that addressed. And there was essentially, we had applied for grandfathering the stair that was not accepted, and ultimately came up with a design that was accepted through the city for the existing stair, adding a rated corridor from the stair to the outside. And that led us up to about August. They gave us the approval for that approach. August 5th, we uploaded drawings reflecting a corridor that the city had requested us to rate the ceiling for the corridor during construction. And then in the week of August 23rd, really just focused on getting the building ready for occupancy. So we had done a lot during the summer. We were allowed to start to put a lot of the work in place to be able to separate students and construction. And then September 30th, we had a Zoom meeting regarding responses to comments we received on one of the submissions for the permit application. And so this goes through the timeline of when we receive comments and our responses to those. So we received comments July 7th. And asking for statement of special inspections, some occupant load questions. There was some back and forth on the naming of the documents. Essentially, we had uploaded a set that said, it was essentially the same set we had given the state fire marshal for the ADA review that they were doing. That was not permitted. They wanted to say for construction. Ultimately, we arrived at being able to name it conformance set, because that's ultimately what it ended up being after we had the addendum process. So once that was resolved, that took some time to resolve. That was uploaded. And then there's some questions about combustible materials and whether they were not allowed in the section we provided. They were construction drawing clarifications for proposed wall construction. We had sent a change directive on August 3rd to the city to add the exit access corridor as we had discussed with them as a approved approach, and then provided additional cut sheets the next week in regards to the rated acoustical ceiling. A response was sent back. We had a memo that went back August 3rd, and the drawings followed on the 11th. Addressing each one of those comments and what was discussed with the city, both on site and in those meetings. We had a city inspection walkthrough on August 18th. Again, making sure we're all on the same page before the school opened up what they needed in order to sign off on that. And then we received comments on our submission September 10th. And we, at that time, were asked to clarify fixture counts and address a schedule, door schedule edit, and a fire suppression requirement. We responded to that on the 15th, addressing those comments, and received comments back on the 28th, and wanting us to essentially clarify the details on the rated ceiling that had been installed. A question regarding some of our the rating at the stair, and then further clarification on our approach to toilet fixture counts. So we provided a draft memo back to the city on the 30th outlining our approach to addressing all those comments, just to make sure that we're all on the same page before we submit another set of drawings. Essentially, the one item at this point that is in question is the plumbing fixture count and how we had documented approaching that versus how they were interpreting it. And essentially, we agreed that we would reach out to the state plumbing inspector for their interpretation, and have provided them a letter they agree with our approach, and we're going through documenting our responses to their questions. So then we can, when I say we, the state plumbing inspector, the city, and the state fire marshal will get together to review that, and then hopefully we will have be able to move forward with the plumbing fixture count as designed and receive our permit.
Lisa, can I pause for a moment? I think the superintendent has a question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I have a question, but before that, can you just, I don't think we've talked about this, can you update us on what the status of, what is the work that's happening at Longfellow at this time?
So what is the work that is happening at Longfellow? Right now, there's very, very little, well, I shouldn't say that. I apologize. There was the summer work was to separate the construction from the students. And then just recently, we received an okay to move forward with abatement in the lower level, as well as excavation, well, not excavation, but insulation foundations for the elevator. And so that is the current work that is happening while we work through this final question on the permit.
And then I guess the thing that sticks out for me are some of these, what to my, even though I've been tracking this as best as I can, it's helpful to see all of this laid out this way. So on slide 7, there's a flurry of activity that's happening in, sort of early to mid-August. And then there's just a gap where nothing happens until comments. Again, still mid-August, there's even a pre-inspection walkthrough. But then nothing happens until September 10th. And so what's the, at that point, we have answered any questions that had been asked, and we were just waiting for feedback.
Correct. So we were waiting for our response to what we had submitted back on the memo on the 3rd and the drawings that followed with that memo on the 11th.
And then between September 30th, where this ends, and today is October 21st. Correct. What's the status?
So right now, the status was we got in touch with the state plumbing inspector and had a dialogue with them about our approach to the plumbing fixture count. And he wanted to meet with another plumbing inspector as well as the state fire marshal and have a conversation before they got back to us. But he then got back to us, confirmed that he agreed with our approach, asked us to put together a letter outlining our approach. We put together a letter as well as an example as to how we document that and how we interpreted that, provided that letter back to the plumbing inspector. The plumbing inspector reviewed that letter and this week confirmed that he agrees with our letter and asked just to have a couple additional clarification items so that he could then set up a meeting with the city and the state fire marshal to present this approach. That's where we stand.
So this second gap that I identified is really it's our doing our due diligence, right? So it's not the city is we're waiting for the city to provide any feedback.
Right.
Correct. We're doing our due diligence and going back and forth with different authorities to make sure we're all on the same page and get approval necessary to move forward.
Between those two gaps that I identified, that's basically 2 months of prime construction time that have gone out the window.
Yeah, and for the plumbing fixture counts, the egress numbers, if you calculate them by square foot for that life safety looks at for the egress in from rooms and out of the building, a typical classroom of 800 square feet, you'd have 40 occupants and 20 occupants per or 20 square feet per occupant. The plumbing fixtures, based on that through in the entire building, would be many, many, many more, and we'd have to create more toilet rooms throughout the entire building. And it's not just it's water closets, it's lavatories, it's drinking fountains, and so we have to look at that. And so the typical classroom may hold anywhere from 20 to 24, 25 students, and so it's significantly less. So that's part of the reason to really do our due diligence and to pursue this, because the implication of adding many, many toilets would be a big challenge.
Superintendent Matthew has questions. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure you were all set. Thank you. Matthew?
Yeah, Mark, and Lisa, I'm curious who in the city is driving these plumbing questions. Is it a plumbing inspector or is it a plans reviewer? And this is one of the more surprising things that I've seen that you're dealing with. Others I can maybe disagree with some of the process on, but this one in particular is a little bit of a head scratcher, especially the timing of it. So I'm curious the genesis of who's driving this on the city side, and if it's a plumbing inspector, is it a new plumbing inspector? Because you obviously didn't deal with that at Lyseth, which I presume that your plumbing engineers did use the same analysis by way of establishing, fixture counts for the work there. And obviously, we're going to talk about this 2 more times with the other 2 schools as well.
Yeah, the comments, the occupant load calculations are from the plan reviewer, so that's the individuals providing the feedback to us and the comments to us, and their understanding of what the occupant load is.
That's the same plan reviewer from the onset. Is that correct?
Is that Paul?
Sorry, Jeff Birnbaum.
Okay.
I'm on mute. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mark, and you guys design a lot of schools across the state. Have you ever had, I'm kind of, along with other people, kind of flabbergasted with this approach to counting plumbing fixtures. Have you run into this in other municipalities in the state?
Typically, no. In fact, we've even have on our record from the previous state plumbing inspector, the chief plumbing inspector, that the approach that we've outlined is one we've used on many schools, and we have correspondence in our records that approach was acceptable, and most jurisdictions, I'm trying to think if I've ever had a jurisdiction that didn't, and I don't. And it's not only the approach of the egress occupancy count versus for instance, a school district class size policy, but then also simultaneous use, the idea that you wouldn't have all the students in their classrooms and additionally the gym full of people and the cafeteria full of people. And so there's those 2 aspects. No, we have not on our other projects encountered this.
Thanks.
Matthew, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you all done before I called on Paul?
Yes, I'm all done. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Matthew, were you all set? I would say so. Okay.
Matt.
He's on mute. I think he's trying to talk. He's on mute.
Matthew?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. I was talking away. Mark, you answered my question. I wanted to be absolutely certain that it's not a plumbing inspector that's driving this within the city. It's the actual plan review staff.
Correct. And I think Jeff Birnbaum asked if it was a consistent plan reviewer on this project. It has been, yes, a primary plan reviewer. Some of the items that Lisa referred to involved others as well. And so there was not just this plan reviewer, but the issue of the approach to the exiting of the stairs from the second floor that involved individuals from different departments as well.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
All right. I think at this point, we're going to move from the aspects of the permitting to just the last slide, just to quickly, we won't go through it, but that was the back and forth on the construction phasing plans themselves. And so in addition to the permit, this is an aspect of this middle understanding at each phase how the site is being organized and how we are protecting occupants and separating occupants from construction activities, and a lot of designation items on it, just back and forth to ensure that every I is dotted and T is crossed on those.
Matthew?
Sorry, I'm going to be a broken record here, Mark, but I just want to be clear on these things. Same individual who's raising all of these questions about phasing and potentially bringing up issues that you haven't had to deal with in the past, i.e. that you didn't have to deal with at Lyseth while the school was occupied and construction was ongoing?
Yeah, that's primarily correct. Yep.
Okay. And just one last question about plan reviewers. The plan reviewer that did Lyseth is not the plan reviewer doing any of these current schools?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Mark, will you just comment on the purpose of the construction phasing in terms of construction sequencing and safety?
Absolutely. And so there's a really kind of two important aspects of it. One, it's understanding where the contractor's activities are going to be on the site. And so that also ensures that there's access and even just not from a code perspective, but even just logistical aspects on the site. How is traffic moving on the site? How are people getting in and out of the building safely? And just understanding where those boundaries, where the fencing is, to separate those activities. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also, as we look at the phasing, there's how at each phase are we ensuring code compliance with the building and the areas that are being renovated and the areas that, i.e. under construction, and the areas that are occupied. So even though we're in the middle of a construction site, it's still, the building needs to be code compliant during that time frame. And so at each phase it has to. And so these documents describe where the activities are going place, how they're separated, how egress is being managed during that phase in order to ensure there's compliant egress. And so that's the primary consideration of those phasing plans.
Any questions at this time? Okay. Seeing none, go ahead, Matt. Excuse me, Mark.
Yeah, and so again, I'm gonna toss it back to my good colleague Lisa for the same thing with Reiki.
I think I saw Javier wave his hand. Oh, it has to go. Oh, leave your hand raised, Javier.
Yeah,
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Before we do that, though, can we talk about the implications of what we just went through? I mean, where is Longfellow sort of from a budgetary and timeline standpoint? You know, we're looking at that as a 3 school years project, with this being the first school year.
This is Jeff, CHA. I would suggest we go through the remaining slides pertaining to Reiki and Presumpscott, and then at the end, we'll be prepared to address those questions pertaining to timeline and cost impact.
Okay, but I'm I'm okay, I guess, if everybody else is. But I am concerned that, we're 45 minutes into a half, an hour and a half meeting and, have gone through one of three. And so it doesn't bode well for much of a discussion on those other issues, which I think are the ones that are most germane to this group.
I would say much of what you have observed with Longfellow is similar to that in Presumpscot and Reiki. So I would ask Harriman to go through it in consideration of time, so we can focus on the cost and the impact discussion on the other schools.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Superintendent. Mark and Lisa, does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay.
Works great. So we'll go relatively quickly through these. And again, if there are questions at the rate at which we're going to go through them, just stop us. So Reiki's Portable applied July 30th. We had meetings the 20th with the city. We received email comments on July 12th, and we responded to those on July 16th. Let's see here, let me get my controls working. And we received comments back in the portal, the actual official comments on the 21st, and we got the permit on the 22nd. So essentially we received those through email, we responded to those as fast as possible, and then got the permit the day after the official comments came through. Any questions on the portable before we move to the building? All right, seeing none, we're going to roll right into the building. We applied for this permit on July 29th. We had several meetings with the city and permit management meeting. We had, there was a question they had about our approach to the additions. They met specifically with our code reviewer to go over some of the alternate approaches they had proposed, ultimately not accepting those. And then we got comments officially back. We met virtually with Greg, who's filling in for another person while they're on vacation, and worked through those comments. We met based on the 8-4 meeting. We clarified a bunch of questions through email on the 6th and the 11th. And then we had another meeting on the 30th to really just walk through what were the final outstanding comments and our approach to those in regards specifically to the firewall that they were questioning. They were questioning our approach to the firewall, separating the additions, and they reached out to the state fire marshal for an interpretation and indicated that they were still working with them, and ultimately the city informed Harriman, the city building official, will not require the separation for the 800 square foot addition. So ultimately we were asked to remove any reference to that firewall in the documents. There's a conversation here, I'm not going to get into it in detail, but a lot of back and forth over what to name the set. And that's what conversations to clear intake are from when we submitted to when ultimately they accepted our conformance set. And so that is that conversation. The date we received comments was the 29th. They've asked us to provide fixture counts, clarify accident loads, provide information on the kiln, and clarify different uses of spaces and our approach to separating the admin. We responded to all of those on August 6th. And then city gave us additional comments. We received via email through on August 10th and 11th, asking us to look at the firewall details. This is all before we had that conversation about no longer needing it, and what was needed in order to document compliance with that firewall. And look at the second floor outdoor space and how that was occupant loads were being addressed. We responded on the 13th, outlining our approach to both the firewall and the outdoor plaza. We received additional comments on the 13th, and that they did not agree with our approach to the firewall. We responded back, ultimately saying that is our approach to it, and ultimately, long story short, they wanted to reach out to the state fire marshal to get an interpretation, and the September 30th meeting ultimately resolved that question. Here, we got city comments on the 16th, and then we responded to those on September 6th, because we were still working through the firewall, and we submitted those back, ultimately eliminating anything addressing the firewall, addressing the plaza, and asked if at this time we could apply for a foundation permit. No, I'm sorry, we did not. That was not where we were addressing the firewall. We were still putting details together on our approach to the firewall. I apologize, I skipped around. And we were addressing the plaza and asking if we could apply for foundation permits so that we could get foundations going because of the winter season coming. And we were told that because the firewall was in question, which ultimately the addition is where we would need those foundation permits, we were not allowed to apply for a foundation permit. And that was the genesis of their comments on the 15th. We inquired on the 21st about status of conversation with the state fire marshal, and they had not heard. We heard from them on the 27th that they had not heard back, and ultimately requested a meeting on the 30th. We had that meeting, and that is where they made the determination they were not going to require the firewall. They asked us to remove any reference to it, and they mentioned they didn't have record of the drawings that we had sent back on the 9th and the 15th. We resent those. Those were the phasing construction drawings. And after that, they had reviewed those and had no more questions on the phasing. And the September 30th, we submitted a response via revised conformance set, outlining our responses. And October 4th,
Can you pause for 1 second before we get going too much further? And I think that Emily Figdor had a couple questions, and I think it's on a previous slide.
I did, thank you. I just had a quick question, two quick questions. One, I'm understanding both with this project and with the Longfellow project that there were delays regarding delays because of the naming, how we were naming documents. Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, there was back and forth between us and the city as to what to name the set. The original set we uploaded essentially said the title of it was State Fire Marshal Review Set. Ultimately, that was the set we sent to the state for their review for permits. They came back and said, no, we need the for construction set. And at that time, we explained that ultimately this was addenda, and we would be providing the conformance set. And there's some back and forth as to exactly what that was. Ultimately, they did agree to take in a set called the conformance set.
And is that type of conversation about the naming of documents part of this process?
I think they just wanted clarity that it was a for construction set. And so what we were trying to explain to them was just that the set we were providing is, we offered to provide the bid set and all the addendum, but ultimately the conformance set would have all that included. So I think there was just some confusion as to what it was that ultimately we were providing.
Okay. Most jurisdictions, if it's a sealed or stamped, if our stamp is on it, our professional seals on it, and that's usually what suffices. But some jurisdictions are very particular. This one in this case.
Thank you. And then with respect to the foundation permit and not being able to move forward with the foundation because of the outstanding question about the firewall, was that, my understanding is that foundation permits aren't usually that challenging to come by. And so I'm just wondering, was that a surprise that we weren't able to get the foundation permit?
I think it was, go ahead, Lisa, I'm sorry.
That's all right, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it was a little bit of a surprise on our end that the foundation, that they interpreted the fact that the firewall sat on the foundation as being reason enough to not move forward with the review of the foundation permit. So that was a little bit of a surprise because the firewall itself is just using the support of a slab to rest on.
I see. Thank you for that clarification.
Are you all set, Emily?
I am. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I just want to recognize that DABC member Jessica Marino has joined us, and I'm going to go to Councilor Ray. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I have my video off because my internet seems very glitchy. What I did just want to mention, and I apologize, I'm going to have to leave this meeting early because I have another meeting. So I just wanted a chance to say, I understand we're going through this and talking about the back and forth and why we are where we are, not in an effort to place any blame, but in an effort to explain kind of where we are. And I hope that we don't go to a blaming place. And one thing that I want to say is that I'm actually shocked that 4 weeks is what was the expected permit approval process. I have been submitting permits in the city of Portland for years, and I don't think I've ever gotten one in 4 weeks. I've been waiting 3 months already right now for a new 3-story back porch. So I just want to make sure that we all understand that the city of Portland is notoriously slow and notoriously difficult in this process. And I certainly hope no one is going to try to insinuate that this project has been targeted in any way. The city is slow. I mean, the complaints about doing business in this manner in the city of Portland are valid. It is something I have complained about for years as a counselor and tried to have fixed. It is something that needs a lot of attention. But certainly I wouldn't think that this process has been slowed in any way intentionally. And I hope that's not where we're going. So I'm just saying that preemptively. And I'm afraid I cannot stay for the rest of the discussion. I'll be here for like 5 more minutes, but I did want to just make sure that got out. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions right now before we move on? Okay. So I think to the superintendent's point, and I hate to put you on speed, Lisa, but I think we need to move on a little bit faster. Thank you.
All right. So essentially, no, that's fine. I just try to balance the information, but if you've all seen it, you understand dates were received on October 4th, and we are responding to those. The 2 that are outstanding right now are plumbing fixtures, which will be resolved at the same time with Longfellow. This will be essentially a precedent for all 3 and going forward. And the atrium has been determined in this last round of review that it is not considered a previously approved atrium and needs to be addressed. And so that's what we are responding to. And we'll be ready to submit back on that as soon as we have the letter and the drawings done for that. So moving on to Brzezinska. I'll pause and look, see if there's any questions. Not seeing any. Moving on to Brzezinska. So portable permit was applied for on the 12th. Meetings with the city. There's a meeting on the 10th and the 12th and other various exchanges. But it was determined when we met with the city and through their comments as well that they were indicating that the portables need to be sprinklered based on a 2018 NFPA code. At that time, there was many things that were looked at for alternate locations for the classes in lieu of the portables, which are mentioned here on the screen. Ultimately applied for a waiver for the sprinkler requirement. Essentially, that it was deemed that just the relocation of the portables was not enough to trigger a new construction code that fell under existing structures, and therefore the sprinklers were not required. And I'm paraphrasing a lot of detailed information that went into that, but ultimately that was the resolve. The response back to the comments was on the 10th, and the waiver was also on the 10th. So they waited. I was informed that they're going to wait to respond to our submission until that waiver was reviewed and ultimately was approved on the 14th. We submitted back, we received comments, submitted again, and we got the permit on the 22nd of September. Pause there for a minute, see if there's any questions, and moving on to Presumpscot building. Oh, sorry, this is the foundation permit. This is when we saw that we were still working through the IECC 2021 code and the applications and determination for that. We wanted to get a foundation permit out. September 22nd, we applied for that. We got the okay from the city to apply for one, which you need to get in order to apply. We've gone back and forth with them a couple times on clarifying some of the phasing of the foundations and egress. And as of tonight, we replied to we provided drawings on the 20th and replied to their additional questions today via email. And we are hopeful that we'll have this any day now. I'll pause there, see if there's any questions on the foundation. And moving on to Presumpscot. We applied for this on the 13th of July. There was a meeting with the city. They did share with us that 2021 IECC did apply to this building. They did let us know that they didn't have a way of documenting it yet. It was such a new code. So we did some collective research to find out how do you document it, and ultimately they would, because ASHRAE 90.1 2019 is a compliance path, we can use that to document it. And that was approved by the city to be able to do that. We received comments on the 9th. The major ones are around plumbing fixture count and IECC 2021. And so we have not given a formal application back at this time. Couple reasons. The major one is just the review time of getting up to speed on the IECC 2021 and conducting that review. We have that fully complete and everything documented, except for one final conversation we were having on switching of, we have to control the outlets with occupancy sensors as part of that. We have that clarified. And at this point, are waiting also for the letter on the fixture count so we can submit all of that back at once. And that is where we're at.
I think, Lisa, we have our impact slides now.
We do. I think they might be passed here. Let me get to that.
Just while she's doing that, everybody, I just want to make sure that you're aware of the groundbreaking ceremonies as well as the ribbon cutting at Lyseth. If you haven't responded yet, just let Emily Waugh know from the email that she sent all of us. Thank you, and turning it back over to Lisa. Thank you.
And just very quickly, can I add that these slides, I think, were added after the packet was posted, so the rest of us do not have that. So at some point, Emily Waugh, if you could send that to me, then I will upload the new deck to the board docs.
Great,
yep,
thank
I'll send it right after.
Okay.
All right, cool. Jeff Beerbaum of CHA. Lisa, I guess there are impacts to the project as a result of the permitting back and forth that is cause for change orders to be incurred and for Presumpscot to be incurred. This is a summary of what those are. Lisa, can you just go to the next slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a delay for each one of the projects in the schedule. The delay is not necessarily day for day. I think it's important to note that we'll call it some early works. We're able to get started prior to the permit issuance for all three schools to try to keep on track to the schedule as much as possible. You heard about the construction phasing a little earlier on from Mark. I think that's important to note when we further discuss the impacts of the project. And I want to get to the cost, so if we can go to the next slide. Lisa, I can talk to these items, but if we just go to the next slide real quick, or do you want to?
I'll just talk to him really quick if you want. Disruption to education. Hope you can hear me. So we've been looking at modifications to this original phasing constantly as this process evolves. And there's a possibility of a longer duration in the portable classrooms. And this is both at Longfellow and Reiki and Presumpscot, essentially. Right now, as the portables are being relocated at Presumpscot, we do have students temporarily in the gymnasium while those portables get relocated, and they'll move out to those. And then what could have been done differently? We could have pushed the award and start dates out further. Bidding period that we had outlined was based on the LISIS timeframe. Essentially apply for the permits several months before bid. Request a virtual meeting with the CEO prior to applying for the permits to make sure that we're all on the same page, see if that was a possibility. And what we're currently doing right now is prioritizing submittals and making sure, looking ahead, making sure identify any questions so that when we do have the permits, we have things either procured or in the process of being procured, and we're not waiting for any of that.
So when we look at cost impacts and these delays, we have to look at contractor and subcontractor inefficiencies. We have to look at the original schedules of which that the subcontractors were bought out. We have to look at the procurement of the materials. We have to look at the general conditions, which is the labor that the general contractors have, such as the superintendent, project managers, accountants, project engineers, assistant site superintendents. You have to look at the general conditions at the subcontractors who bought out the project based upon a particular schedule. We have to look at acceleration. So there's no doubt that there's an impact. We had a stop work order September 1st for Longfellow. We just got approval to start back up, as was mentioned earlier, for the asbestos in the basement, which in the scheme of things is not a big scope of work. And also some of the excavation work, and we still don't have a permit there. So we have to look at acceleration, which is different from recovery, which I can certainly talk about. And one of the bigger costs is going to be winter conditions. Whereas before these projects and the schedule showed the foundations at Longfellow and Presumpscot to happen prior to winter conditions setting in, we now need to take into consideration. What I mean by winter conditions, I don't mean snow removal. I mean when we pour concrete, there's additives have to be put into the concrete. There are heating blankets that need to be put on top of the concrete, the pours, the timing of the pours, the connection points, whatever it may be, in order for the foundations to appropriately cure and set into place. These are extra costs. And we're not going to know what until the permits are actually issued, how and to what extent that the schedule is impacted, whether or not we're going to be working time and a half from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. is a normal shift, and then a shift and a half is from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. We don't know if a Saturday schedule will work and how much time that's going to be make up. I had Mark point out the construction phasing because that's what is permitted. That construction phasing, which pertains to the logistics and the site means and methods while the children are in class, That's extremely important, and that may change. And extended rental modulars. So the big question is what is the budget impact? So we've anticipated with all these things under consideration for each one of the projects, total for all three projects is around $750,000 to $1 million. And that potentially, of course, we will do everything we can to mitigate that, negotiate that, work with the contractors, but we really need to understand once we get the permits how the actual construction sequencing is going to occur within the original construction phasing that has been permitted while these schools are in operation. But this is what we've come up with. And with these change orders as well, you should be aware that the Longfellow firework that was done from the permit comments with these rated ceilings and some other stuff that they wanted done was to the tune of $85,000 on its own. And the contractor did fantastic delivering that because we were hoping that we were going to have the permit at the beginning of September and needed to get the kids in school. And Harriman did a fantastic job. So this is where we're at right now, $750,000 to $1 million.
I want to open up for questions, so I'm going to go to Aura, school board member. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair. Would you mind going back to the slide that said the timeline, like the effect on the timeline? Because I think for me it was difficult without having what the planned timeline was versus this, so I couldn't quite grasp what the change was. So. So the 12 weeks, so for Longfellow, could you help, like just with each one, could you help, like what was the plan and how is it changing, just to help, Yeah, let me walk you through it. So Longfellow, essentially it would be an additional 12 weeks. So it was supposed to go until the end of the summer in 2023. Essentially it would be another, 12 weeks or another phase, another half of a year, essentially was what we had done for phasing. Okay, but we don't know. The unknown means we don't know the start, but you're saying once started.
We don't,
Anticipation is 12.
Well, we don't know the exact impact at this time. This is our anticipated approximation at this point, not knowing. We have a little bit better feel on Reiki and Presumpscot. And on Reiki, working, we've been constantly updating the phasing plans with the contractor as things kind of evolve. And right now we have a really good plan in place that looks like essentially that construction was supposed to be done in June of 2023. And the work over the summer was really just removing portables and site work. We've come up with a plan to where if we can get things going, imminently here, that we can consume that summer and do construction during that summer, and essentially just need the summer for the construction inside the building as well. That's all contingent on finishing phase 1, which is related to the permit, by February vacation. If that can't happen, then the schedule may slip into the fall of 2023. Contractors are working right alongside us to figure out how can we be as nimble and as possible to mitigate some of this. So that's a couple months over the summer.
And then, sorry, Lisa. So then the portables, it looks like in Presumpscot, if it's October, you'd have to extend, but Reiki, assuming by this end of summer it would end, you wouldn't have to continue the portables longer than planned, right?
If we were able to do that. That is true, and we'll know better once we have that permit if that's a viable plan or not. Still, keep in mind, Presumpscot, you guys own the portables, so it's essentially there's no lease extension, if you will, and so that they would just be in use, so that have an educational impact, not necessarily a monetary impact for the portables, but the schedule it could.
And then can you remind me with Presumpscot, and I apologize because I know it was the foundation piece and the building permit piece, the foundation for the portable to be moved, that has been approved or that wasn't yet approved?
Yes, the portables, the permit is fully executed for that. They have it. They are in the process of moving the portables.
Okay. Okay, so that isn't delayed any further at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
They were originally supposed to be done in August of 2022, and potentially it may extend. Best guess at this point, October. I say guess. It's professional opinion, looking at schedules and what they know right now. October 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set, Aura? Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to Matthew and then to Jay Norris after Matthew.
So quick question for Jeff. Jeff, I'm curious, so you've created some thoughts on, what these potential carrying costs could be moving forward, and you identified $750,000. I'm curious how much of that was worked through with the individual contractors for each of the 3 affected schools, because I'm sure they're looking at this in a way that you might not be internally, and I'm curious if these estimates that PHA has established are inclusive of their feedback and any lost general conditions that they're going to look to recover for these lost 3 months or so.
That's a good question. We've had a couple with respect to Longfellow. We are in conversations with Blaine Casey himself, and he will not provide us his dollar figure of the delay claim until such time that the permit is issued and he re-looks at the construction sequencing and understand what the impact is in terms of how we're able to accelerate the schedule and make up time, especially to get us out of winter conditions. Just to give you a little logic behind how we came up with this rough order of magnitude, Blaine Casey put us on notice in mid to late July, that the permit wasn't issued yet, and it is causing for inefficiencies, even though they were still working on site, doing early works. We then got the stop work order from the city on September 1st, and we're just able to remobilize, doing that limited amount of scope of work yesterday. So their burn rate is $32,307 a month in general conditions. So we took that into consideration. And then we looked at what the costs were for excavation as well as underground MEP and concrete, and took into consideration some winter conditions. And this is how we came up with a figure for Longfellow and Presumpscot. So these conversations haven't happened yet, or they haven't given us any numbers yet. We're certainly not going to give them the numbers. We want them to give us what they believe they may be owed and what the impact is, and then we will work with them to mitigate the impact to schedule and costs.
Okay, thank you for that. His quoted burn rate seems incredibly low to me, but it's an interesting number, half of what I would have expected it to be.
So he's 32,307 for general conditions. Reiche's 64,356 a month. And Great Falls at Presumpscot is 37,440 a month. And there's another impact here that I haven't mentioned, but Longfellow already lost their concrete sub and already replaced them over the summer, to no cost or schedule impact to the project. Presumpscot put us on notice that if we didn't have the permit by October 1st, October 5th, that they would lose their site work sub. So they haven't advised us yet that that sub has walked away, but we have been working with them and communicating with them and keeping them actively engaged, just to keep the process moving forward, so that we don't lose any subs and cause more impact to the project. But this is a domino effect, and we're all just trying to navigate through it.
Okay.
All set, Matthew?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move to Mr. Norris.
Hey, thanks. I have two, maybe three questions. The first is, Lisa and Mark, we've spoken really early on about the need and your affirmation that there would be professionally certified project manager or project management on these jobs, either, I guess, internally, you initially spoke to, I think, Lisa, you said that you would serve as that, or if not, if externally, they would be bonded. So I want to ask again, because, this being my field, is there professional project management on both sides leading these processes that are overseeing the daily process of these projects? And who is that person or people?
Sure, and Jay, I'll start it, and then Lisa can certainly chime in, and others as well. But so Lisa is managing the project, as she said, across all three. She is supported in addition to that. She's supported by we have a key point person who is a project manager and serves as project manager internally on the projects. And so while Lisa is overseeing all aspects of all three, she is supported by three separate individuals on each of the projects. And then underneath them, there are a series of people that help get things done. But and so there's not just one tier of project management. There's actually two tiers of project management to make this support necessary. And I think there's, given the degree of back and forth that you've seen in the slides here, it couldn't have happened without that level of organization and project management that was going on. So there was a tremendous amount of information, and the responses were timely, and that was because, again, testament to the project management that we had in place.
May I ask, are any of your PMs, any of these tiers that you speak of, are any of those folks either degreed or professionally certified project managers?
So it's customary in our industry that experience is the determinant that someone advances to the designation of project manager. And there are probably other architects on this phone call that can attest to that, both Matt and Paul.
Well, Jeff, excuse me, I don't find it really customary. I know that it happens, but I'm not sure I find it customary.
Jay, I
do appreciate that, Matt. What I'm getting at here is it's a question to Harriman, and I appreciate all your input as an architect, but as a project manager, that's what I'd like our committee to kind of understand, because you have architects and you have designers and drafters, and then you have project managers. I don't find that and that's okay if it's customary to Harriman and to some of the local. I don't find that customary. But if that's
not just a local, Jay. It's throughout the industry.
And Jay, what I was trying to say is I have serious concerns, but I don't have serious concerns about Harriman's ability to manage a project.
I do. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. I really do. But it's my questioning is for Harriman here, and I do have concerns.
This is
managed. I do.
This is Jeff Birnbaum, CHA. Mm-hmm. We are the owner project managers. Mm-hmm. And our function is to represent the interest, of course, of Portland Public Schools and work with the team collaboratively. So to the extent as to whether or not there is professional project management on board, there is. And it's us in collaboration and conjunction with Harriman. So in terms of a development schedule, in terms of responsiveness, in terms of the development strategic strategy, in terms of construction phasing strategy and dealing with the city and dealing with the contractors, I think we have that ammo, that bench here. From what I've seen thus far, this is somewhat out of the ordinary. We always deal with the cities and issues come up, but this, to an extent, this is, from my experience, out of the ordinary. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question in terms of professional project management for construction and developments, but
it definitely helps. I appreciate that. I know that in part of certified project management, part of that discipline is, as you probably know, risk analysis at the scoping phase, and I won't get into all of that, but typically that's kind of where I was getting at, because there's typically a workaround when you hit those walls and how to move processes forward. And sometimes I realize it isn't possible, and sometimes it is. So that's what I was hoping to better understand. I would like to ask just Jeff and Mark, this $750,000, where do you think where does that money come from eventually to make that amount up? What's the source of that?
So right now, we haven't started to analyze that aspect of that. I mean, right now we are pushing hard to get the permits in hand. I think it's going to require an evaluation of unspent funds, and I think it's a broader conversation with the owner in terms of the project budgets and how do we allocate funds. Where do we find the funds to cover those costs?
Got it. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jay. Moving to the superintendent.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that same question that Jay asked, and maybe since there is no specific answer to it at this point, can we at least have an understanding of that estimate and how it breaks out by schools, and then how it breaks out in relation to the reserves that we currently have for the project overall, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 that we had talked about potentially reallocating for some of the alternates that were sort of left on the drafting floor, if you will. So obviously, 500,000 is available, but beyond that, what is, so if it's evenly distributed across the schools, do they each have enough money in the contingencies to be able to cover those costs? And then, to sort of Jay's question, what are some of the risks associated with, the fact that we're using up what were, standard contingencies, some of which had already been, shaved down? What are the implications? I mean, I think what I really wanted this conversation to be is about these kinds of things. Like, okay, so what can we expect to see happen now that we know that we're like months behind and hitting winter conditions and, losing subcontractors and all this stuff? What are the things that we can expect, and make that visible to the district advisory group, as well as to the board, the council, and others, because I think it's really important to me that this be something visible to people, because we're at a point that we did not expect to be at.
Certainly. The action item and takeaway from this meeting is, I can give you the breakdown right now if you wish at a high level, or we can provide it to you. I could write an email, but or however you wish. But without having the permit, which is the sledgehammer and go-to excuse of the contractor, we just don't have a lot of leverage here. And at each week that passes without having the permit has a domino effect as to how the construction sequencing and the logistics will actually work, including the construction phasing and logistics, and so it's very hard to pinpoint that. So what I've provided is an order of magnitude and what your risk is at $750,000 to $1 million. We can run the contingency scenarios associated with that and the breakdowns by the school, and that can be produced in a very transparent, of course, manner. But again, we just simply don't know the total impact with respect to the schedule. I talk about acceleration. There's a cost to that when you work a shift and a half. There's a cost to working on Saturday. Does it make sense to spend $1 million to make up 3 weeks? No. If that's what it is, right? We have to analyze, once the contractor gives us their construction sequencing, and they give us we can work a Saturday for 5 Saturdays, we can work a shift and a half for 3 weeks. We have what's called the construction schedule. And in that construction schedule, you have construction sequencing. That construction sequencing follows what's called critical path. So what we want to understand is what is the impact to the critical path by accelerating the schedule, either by working Saturdays or shifts and a halves. And what is that actual cost? And is that cost equitable, and does it make sense to the time that we're going to make up? And then And if it doesn't make sense to spend that money, where can we, what does it do to the schedule, and when can we do the actual work, to try to mitigate that schedule? So these are a lot of moving parts, but it always comes back to the same response from the general contractor is where is our permit? Because they want to be fully mobilized. They want to be fully efficient and effective in their work. And they can't do that without a full building permit. So that's where we're at. So with the 750 to $1 million, we can run all the numbers and the contingency and where that stands and where the funding comes from. But in terms of a conclusive and vetted and appropriately, where all parties, consultants, look at this with the great level of due diligence, we just don't have the answer on a schedule impact right now.
And then is there, so the $1 million is, assuming that we had the permit in hand tomorrow, right?
This is what we know today, correct?
Right. So is there like a predictable, if it goes another week, it's going to cost us this much more. If it goes another 2 weeks, it's going to cost us this much more. Because I also am looking for, sort of some leverage points to be able to get, some of the, the buy-in and, understanding that we're floundering here. We're burning cash, and it's the taxpayers' cash. And I just want to, that's my concern is like, we're quickly reaching a point where we're not going to have enough money in, and I don't know if we're quickly reaching a point, but we will be reaching a point where we don't have enough money in contingency to cover these added costs. And we haven't encountered any contingencies other than not having a permit.
It's a good question. If we were to take it just day for day, and a day for day delay, meaning or week by week or month by month, assuming that the contractor wasn't working or working efficiently, just in general conditions alone between the three projects. So it's 64 plus 32, so it's 97, 104. It's $143,000 a month just in general conditions alone. And that is if the contractors just say, we are not doing work until you actually have the building permit. And that's just in general conditions. So that should give you an idea of what that cost is. We add on what it will be for acceleration and winter conditions. So if another month goes by and we're doing foundation work in February versus getting the foundation work all done by mid-January, that's another month of winter conditions. That can be another $100,000. So we can write up for you the general conditions burn rate and give you an idea of what that is, and provide for you what the impact is overall with the breakdown by, and just by way, for each school. Longfellow is $300,000 to $400,000. Przemysl is about $300,000 to $400,000, and Reike is about $150,000 to $200,000. With Longfellow, we're dealing with about $100,000 to $120,000 of GCs. Of that $300,000 to $400,000, we're dealing with about a $70,000 to $80,000 asbestos issue as well. $85,000, as I mentioned earlier, regarding all the work they made us do in September. For Przemysl, we are looking at winter conditions. We are looking with additional insulation and electrical work that they wanted from the Green New Deal and code work at around $100,000 to $150,000. And we're looking at GCs there as well. And then Reike is really about GCs. With Reike, we were able to work with them to get them to do a good amount of work that could be done prior to any city inspections that needed to get done. So we were able to keep them busy and mitigate some of the major schedule impacts. But so that's where we're at, and that's the breakdown.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think that's a lot of figures that you threw out. So can you put that into a document and get it to the superintendent, and then he will work with staff and Harriman, and where we go. Maybe we have to call a special DABC meeting. I don't know, but I think if you could get that to the superintendent and his staff, he'll be in touch with us to let us know what we need to do next, because in totality, it's a little scary what you're talking about. So superintendent, yes. I want to also be cognizant of the time. I know all of you, it's about 20 minutes of 8, but I don't want to rush it because this is very, very important. So superintendent, I want to finish with you, and then Matthew has a couple questions. And
I think I can talk to Jeff later about getting, additional information beyond what he shared today. So I think that was super helpful, Jeff. So I think that's kind of what I was hoping to put on the table. So thank you, Sarah.
No, thank you. I think it was a little overwhelming just to hear all those figures. So going to Matthew and then to Emily, and then if we can wrap it up with anybody that hasn't spoken or has an additional question. So Matthew, you're up.
Thank you, Sarah. So just it's building on what Javier had asked for. Jeff, if in your work, if you could establish, a risk analysis on the potential loss of known subcontractors and, what that might entail as well, because I think we need to start to understand that if Great Falls is making rumblings that they're going to lose a site work contractor, what that potential impact could be based on, the known construction environment right now about getting a different earthwork contractor or drywall or whatever the case may be. And I think as much as you can associate, generalities of known values on a, probably on a bi-weekly basis, because it seems like Harriman's, if you look at the timeline of the permitting struggles, it seems to be 2 to 4 weeks seems to be the cycle, and I don't know where we are in that 2 to 4 week cycle right now with the reviews, but it would probably be good to understand the impacts of not having a building permit through the end of October, and I think it's important that you don't press too hard with the contractors to give them carte blanche, because they're right now in a position where they have all the leverage. So obviously we have to be cognizant of that, but it would be helpful if they could maybe provide losses to date as a way to, potentially understand what the future may hold. That might be asking them too much and showing your hand, but at this point, I don't know what other options you have, because you are at their mercy.
Right. Let me give that some thought in terms of the outreach to the contractor, because I don't want to lay out our hand and give them that much more leverage. We are working under the assumption that everyone remains intact and they're on board, because they've been fully communicated with as to what's going on with respect to issuance of the permit, and keeping things moving forward as quickly as possible. So, but we can I probably have that conversation directly with not the PMs, but probably the owners of the firms.
Yeah, it strikes me as important. I don't know, Paul, you've been pretty quiet. I'd be curious your thoughts on that as well.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I'm going to go to Emily, and then if you want to respond to that after, Emily.
I guess I'm not clear on what our strategy is moving forward to actually obtain the permits. I think this conversation about the impacts is important and critical, and it's helped me a lot understand where we're at and what the consequences are so far and could be moving forward. But I'm wondering, what is actual end game in terms of getting the permits, and whether it would behoove us to do a meeting with the city manager and all of the relevant staff, as well as the superintendent, to try to gain consensus around where we're at and what needs to happen in order to actually secure the permits.
So I think that's, I'm not sure that we've had multiple meetings along the way. I think you've been a part of at least one of those. So I don't think that the meeting necessarily, but I guess my question that I wanted to ask earlier, and you just jogged my memory on it, is there ever a situation where you're given a temporary permit that allows you to, like, we can't be that far, right? We've been at this for like 6 months. So we've kind of like run the gamut of everything that could potentially be like bad. Can we get like a temporary permit that allows us to start the work from where we are today and then, start sort of peeling off those issues as we go? And I don't know, stipulate that we won't do anything that's under question at this point, things along those lines. Are there special circumstance permits that allow you to start working?
I'll answer that, and Jeff certainly and Lisa could chime in. I think some of the strategy has been, for instance, the foundation permit, to be able to get that, so that's much less encumbering to try to get, and that allows the contractor to get underway on the critical path of getting foundations in. That's one way. Anecdotally, the challenge we were having with the firewall at Reiki, what we asked, is there a way that we can sort of permit the building itself and resolve the firewall issue after? And the response came back that no, that if we wanted to do that, we would actually have to submit the entire set of drawings as if the addition was not there in order for the project to be reviewed in that light. So I guess that just anecdotally, our strategy is to respond as thoroughly and as quickly as we can to the comments as they come up. And then Jeff, I know you were getting ready to talk. And
I mean, we generally, when you can get a demo permit before you have the full building permit issued or submitted, and then you can get a foundation permit, which covers everything below grade, which is what we went after before you submit a building permit. And then, depending on the size of the project, you can get phased permits. But this project it's so intertwined and a lot going on with construction phasing and logistics. I don't think phased permits would have been a possibility. But the demo and the foundation definitely would have put us in a position, if they were issued as they should have been issued during normal circumstances, we would be less in a dire situation as where we are today.
And is that like now the time has passed and there's no point in trying to get a foundation permit and a demo permit?
I mean, we are so close. In my opinion, we've been very close for the last 60 to 70 days. So I don't think we still take the foundation permit. We'll take whatever they'll give us. So if they can issue that tomorrow, that's fantastic. So
our strategy, Emily, to your question before, is to just, sort of let's try to pick off the what gets us back into the ball game.
Okay. I'm going to move to my co-chair, Mark. Councilor Dion.
Mark's okay. We're not formal here, are we? Listen, as I've said in other meetings, I try to pay attention to what's said. I don't pretend to be an architect or a project manager, but I do realize when we're in a crisis, and we are in a crisis right now, and our kids will suffer the consequence. So I would agree with Chair Figdor that a meeting might be helpful, just so I can reinforce that with key parties in City Hall. I've done my best to monitor what's going on the city side of this. There have been many meetings, both internally and some externally, to try to address this. I'm going to take a report tomorrow to the city manager and the mayor and explain to them what position we're in. And there's nothing more bureaucratic than an inspections department. And sometimes you just have to have a come to Jesus because, sorry, that's the sheriff in me. I like rules and regulations, but sometimes you got to know when to go around them to get something done. So I will take that to them tomorrow, because I think something has to come out. It has to come out quickly. And then if there's value in having the parties dissect this so we don't have to revisit these kind of conditions in the future, I will also advocate for that at the city manager's office and with the mayor. So I've heard everything here tonight, and I'm seriously concerned. And I want to make sure it gets addressed in more than a timely fashion, because timely here is deadly, you know? So I hear you, and I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and we appreciate that. And you'll swing back around, I assume, with the superintendent?
Sure. I mean, no need to hide the ball on this one. Whatever I get for feedback, I'll share with the superintendent as soon as I know something. And,
no, I know you will.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. That way he can articulate it out. Thank you. I'm going to go to Aura and then see if anyone else has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this may be a silly or obvious question, but so in following all of the back and forth with permits, I'm not with the questions that were being asked over the months. Is there something that's outstanding right now for each of these three? And I'm sorry if I missed that. Are there outstanding pieces? And I just, with all the information tonight, I apologize if I missed.
The big one is the response from the state inspector, the state plumbing inspector, and getting that formalized, right?
And that's for all three?
At least two, but probably all three, yeah.
Okay, so it is the state piece. Okay. All right, thank you. And I think I just wanted to verbalize that, you know, it's really hard for us to be hosting these celebrations too. I mean, it really is like, you know, I want to be happy and celebratory, but also like, I don't feel like our communities, you know that this is still like, we really are in this stuck place. So I just want to say that's really difficult too, that, you know, we really are in a bind right now, and, you know, sharing this in the community as we have these projects going. So that's just, I just want to share that's a difficult place to be in as leaders here.
I have to concur, and I'm glad you brought that up, Aura. And I don't know what the thoughts are. I don't know if we're putting salt in the wounds, Superintendent, by having these groundbreakings. I think it may be prudent for us to hold off on any kind of groundbreaking. But what are your thoughts on that?
No. I mean, you know, there's
I know it's ceremonial, but
you know, there's one tomorrow, and you know, and the groundbreaking is you know, I mean, I know what I'm talking about. It's a symbolic, you know, sort of like we're doing this, and we're doing it. We're not doing it as fast or as well as we wanted to do it, but we're doing it. I mean, there are big machines that move, you know, earth, and you know, people with hard hats on, you know, on site. So. I mean, you know, this is like the formality, and we pushed it as far back as we could before we're actually winding up doing a groundbreaking in the middle of a snowstorm.
No, I understand. I think that we just need to be prepared to Aura's point too, that at these events, it may not be the happy, joyous event that we would like it to be. And there may be a lot of questions, you know, raised as well. So I want to start wrapping this up, and I'm going to go to Jeff.
I just want to say to Mark, and so for his conversation, that there is no safety, and safety has never been compromised here for the schools and the children. And any comments that the city has made have been wholeheartedly addressed by Harriman. So there's nothing in the last 60 days that I can think of that it's all code interpretation and these other items that you saw in the slides. And I think that's a very important point when you have your conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Co-Chair Diane, but I don't know who your message was meant for about giving out your cell phone number. Everybody now has your cell phone number. So I didn't know if that was meant for someone in particular.
Oh, I think Jessica was trying to get it, but I don't care if you have it. It's I don't hide.
Well, I just wanted to ask who it was meant for. You're not hiding, I know. Jessica hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to go to Jessica, and then if we could wrap it up, and then we'll go with next steps. Thank you.
I just wanted to speak to the idea of whether we should be doing the groundbreakings, and our students are living and staff are living through this right now, even though it's not making as much progress. And I think it is meaningful to the communities to have the groundbreakings and remind them that it is still going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen, but it's a recognition of them too, and what their schools are going to be like, and what's happening at their schools right now. So I'm still supportive. I still think the groundbreakings are a good thing.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate it. And I'm going to go to Emily, and then we're going to wrap it up, please.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Jessica just said. I was talking to my daughter Harper, who attends Reiki, after the groundbreaking today, and we were talking about the permit, and she said, "Oh, there's work going on," and I understand that we have been able to do some work at Reiki, but the students are feeling the construction already. Even, I think at all three schools, this construction is very visible. It's affecting the way the students, it's affecting their day-to-day lives. So, and these events have been planned, and they're still joyous. So, I say, by all means, let's go through with them.
Great. Superintendent, can you just close us out here? I know you're looking with next steps that I know that Councillor Dion is going to talk with the city manager tomorrow. He'll be back in touch with you, and then we can talk with Harriman further and figure out if we need to make a special DABC meeting, or what do you see from here?
Well, I mean, I think that we're looking to get a more detailed understanding of the financial and programmatic implications, sort of at the current point, and then, what we can expect to be the additional implications as, if this is extended. So I think that's, to me, that was the main point of this conversation, was really sort of for us to begin to take stock. And that's what could lead to, I don't know that it needs to be a special meeting, but definitely at our next meeting, hopefully with permits in place and everything else, for us to begin to assess what are how are we going to address these added costs, and what are the implications for what we said back in the summer this group was going to do, which was to allocate the reserve that had not been yet allocated to alternates. So I think that's why I keep coming back to this, because there was a sequence of things that we needed the DABC to do, and we needed to first have this full picture before we can do those things.
Thank you. I really, really want to wrap this up because it's 8:00. So, Mr. Norris, can you wrap us up really quick?
Absolutely. I'll be very quick. I'm just wondering, for our chairs and for the superintendent, Ms. Figdor, would there be a value in perhaps the DABC having I know maybe we can't have a closed meeting, but there would be value in just a DABC meeting in and amongst itself to maybe not just to look at the whole body of work and where we are, but maybe just to reaffirm our charge and our purview, and to kind of discuss this just as a group without the contractors, without Harriman present. Does anyone think that might be, something that would be helpful, or not so much?
Not sure, first of all, Jay, that we can do that legally, but I'll let the superintendent. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I mean, we can have a meeting just with the DABC, just with elected officials and so on. It would still be an open meeting. So if Harriman wanted to, join in the audience, like today, I haven't checked in several hours, but I don't think there isn't anybody.
We didn't have any attendees. No,
there's nobody attending the meeting. It is on Facebook Live, so there could be a million people watching.
I guess it would be a meeting where, I realize Harriman could be there, but just it would be a meeting sans having to go through the updates, where it would just be kind of a general discussion of the committee itself and where we are. That's what I was kind of getting at. My thoughts on that.
Yeah. And maybe, Jay, if you want to have an offline conversation in terms of specifically what you would want to to have covered in that meeting, and then we can take that under advisement with the chairs and see whether it makes sense to do that. I'm not 100% clear what the purpose is of that meeting, and so I just would want to understand it better. And I know we're sort of tight on time now, but I can talk to you tomorrow or, over the weekend, whatever makes sense.
Yes, sir. I'll get my thoughts together. Thanks. Thanks, Javier.
That would be great. Thank you, Jay. Okay. So thank you, everybody. I know it was a challenging meeting. But to Emily's point and to others' point and Jessica's point, we are in a celebratory, even though it's not so celebratory at the moment. We've come a long way and we'll get there. But so I would encourage you to attend the groundbreakings and the ribbon cutting for Lyseth, and we'll get through it. We get through things all the time. So, all righty. With that, have a great evening. And Emily, if you could get the information to Javier so he can upload it to Board Docs, that would be great. And thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.